A lot of times when we get these conversations about these top players like Embiid is, one of the arguments and one of the pushbacks, Derek, is always this when it comes to Embiid. Who wants to play and team up with Joel Embiid? Why haven't we seen anybody come to Philadelphia and team up with Joel Embiid? Yes, the Jimmy Butler piece happened, but he left.
Well, but not because of Joel Embiid.
Fair. I'm just laying it out. Yeah. He left. James Harden, same thing. He left. Not because of Joel Embiid. He called the general manager and the president of basketball operations a liar. He did leave. Ben Simmons, also an all-star, a face of the franchise. He was here with them and he left. So a lot of times, though, we do get that question, teaming up with Joel Embiid. Now, we'll see what happens this summer because there's going to have to be a decision made. The money is going to have to play a big factor in Paul George and anybody else that's a free agent. But coming here to Philadelphia, we did get that argument a lot. Do you feel like that's still the case? And is Tyrese Maxey taking a little bit of that away because he is the number 2 now?
Look, I think if you want to, why hasn't Joel Embiid recruited anyone? I think it's in large part because they haven't had trade resources or salary cap space to do the recruiting with. Like, it's one thing to be like, I want to play with Joel Embiid. It's another thing to be like, well, they can actually pay me, so let's go play with Joel Embiid.
Also, Jimmy Butler would have played with Joel Embiid.
Yeah, and James Harden
before he was even this Joel Embiid.
Yes.
So
the last time they really had a chance to go out and pursue high-level players was back in 2018. And they were lining up to do that. They had a meeting with LeBron James. Unfortunately, the Sixers general manager got sacked because he was too busy yelling about getting a tall ladder to punch Joel Embiid.
Sacked? What are you? You're an English Premier League analyst now.
Sure,
you're like bringing in the European terms.
Is that really a European term?
Sacked. They use that instead of fired most of the time for their managers. Yeah.
I went with the hangover sack lunch, but go ahead.
Learn something new. All right. Anyway, they had that whole Burnergate controversy, which was very recently the anniversary of it. We probably should have done a show on it, or at least mention it, because that was a wild time in our past.
Still time.
Plenty of time. We
have content June space. Is a long-ass month, all right?
Content space, man.
But they haven't had an opportunity to do that ever since then. They've been tied up to the Ben Simmons contract, to the Tobias Harris contract. They haven't really had first-round draft picks to trade, and when they did trade them, they would use them to acquire players like Pasechniks. They haven't. My point is, they haven't really had a chance to go out and go star hunting in a while. So I don't think it's necessarily like players don't want to team up with Joel Embiid. There's just got to be a way to acquire them, and they've been short on that. But, I mean, look, early on in Joel Embiid's career, when they had cap space like 3 straight years in a row, they had max cap space, it wasn't really, I don't think, realistic to be like, hey, Joe, we know you're like a second-year player, but why can't you get LeBron James to want to come here?
Who also missed the first 2 years of his career with foot injuries.
But I think a lot of the narrative maybe stems from that and the fact that they had that cap space, weren't able to really make the most of it. But I don't think that was necessarily Joel Embiid's fault. It was just really early on in his days as a star player in this league. Now, we'll see whether or not he has any kind of pull in that regard.
Yeah. Like, look, is he the most attractive star to play with? No. We can be honest about that, right?
In large part because nobody in the NBA has experience playing next to his archetype.
Yes, he is. And unlike Jokic, and look, it's not like the Nuggets have been a free agent hotbed in Denver, right? Their most important moves have been draft and trade.
Yeah.
It's not like playing with Jokic has been this big thing. And there are a lot of people who believe he's been the undisputed best player for years now. These guys are not used to playing with big men, not big men who are having the offense run through them. Like, that's just not how the league works. It's not how these guys are playing in college, in high school, in AAU, and every other level. And so for some of these guys, it's like, so what does my game look like next to a player like this? And then you add on the health factor. Like, these guys are smart enough to know, like, okay, I think Joel is really good. I think most of these guys will be like, yeah, he's one of the top 5 players in the league. But if he's not going to be there for me to play with us at the finish line, how much do I really want to play with him? And look, let's be honest too. Philadelphia has had a hard time as an NBA market drawing stars to play here unless they trade for them or draft them. It is not LA. It is not Miami. Like, even the Clippers have an easier time just because it's in a place where NBA players, at least modern NBA players, want to be. And so that's
find
the reality of it.
To be unbelievable because it is a top city in the country.
Especially, and like, look, to the credit.
They always throw Chicago in front. Look, Chicago's in the mix too, but they always throw Chicago in.
I've said this before. To me, the Bulls are the most embarrassing organization in the league, not because they've been run necessarily the worst, but because for an entire generation of basketball fans, you associated the Chicago Bulls with greatness. Like they were the American sports team for an entire decade. They defined the 90s. They were so big that, when obviously COVID impacted this, but the whole world is watching The Last Dance when that comes out because of the importance of Jordan and that team. And they have pieces in there of them doing like a preseason thing in France. And Michael Jordan's getting off the plane and just getting like he's like a pop star over there. And now they're just this obscure, like, oh, they're okay. They're kind of like an 8th seed every single year. And that's all they really care about. Like they're a huge embarrassment. But to your point about Philadelphia, the other organizations, even not so much lately with the Flyers, but historically, the Flyers have been a big free agency team. The Phillies obviously have been huge with free agents in recent years. And the Eagles, thanks to being the most consistently successful team for basically 2.5 decades at this point, people always want to play for them. And so
it is tough
unfortunately for Joel, some of it is like you are building the franchise reputation so that there are more people like Kelly Oubre in the future who are like, oh yeah, this is a place where you win, because that's not been who the Sixers are. There have been pockets of it in history, but they generally have been, unfortunately, the little brother team compared to the Boston Celtics or teams like the Lakers. That's just kind of how it goes.
It is tough to compare like other Philadelphia teams to the Sixers, though. Like baseball, there's no salary cap. Right. You can just go out there and outbid, and as long as you're willing to do that, that will overcome your location. This Philadelphia is not an attraction. I don't think it's really a detriment. No. Like I don't think Philadelphia has a reputation where stars don't want to come here, but it's not LA. It's not an active it's not Florida.
Draw.
It's not New York.
Or even Texas with the the state taxes and the whole all that.
It's everywhere else. You've got to have a contender. You've got to have the money, and you've got to have a star that other teams want to play with. Very rarely has all of that aligned. This is a summer where it can.
We all silly like the mayor.